And this is Broadway in evolution through the Roaring Twenties.
A rehearsal for the April 23rd production of the play When the Lion Roars. The youngsters comprise the children's school at the National Black Theater in Harlem, one of 4 groups to practice and perform here. The theater was founded 14 years ago by veteran actress Barbara Ann Teer.
The National Black Theater comes from a context of transformation. We're in the business of transformation. Our purpose is to transform the experience of theater into a celebration of life. We've existed for 14 and a half years on this corner of 5th Avenue, 25th Street. We have 4 full-time programs. We have a children's school, which is holistic in its approach. We have a performing program, a touring program, which is our outreach program, and we have educational and performance workshops.
Looked at Broadway, you looked at the shows that came out of Broadway, and there were so seldom, if ever, well, there was, of course, but very few shows that had anything to do with black life, and certainly fewer that used black actors.
Now, this has been an unprecedented year for black films because you have black actors, directors, screenwriters represented in nearly every major category at this year's Academy Awards. Now, as you know, my brother played the lead in 12 Years a Slave, but I wanted to see how far black actors in Hollywood had come and what challenges still remain. She was the first black woman to be nominated for an Academy Award for Best Actress. Refusing to be typecast, Dorothy Dandridge vowed never to play a slave on screen. 10 years later, acting roles had dried up and Dandridge was dead of a drug overdose with little more than $2 to her name.
When a black actor wins an Oscar or is nominated, in my opinion, I think Hollywood is sometimes not knowing what to do with them because the path isn't clear.
Of the nearly 3,000 Oscars that have been awarded since 1929, fewer than 30 have been given to people of color.
I told you and told you.
Many of them for roles based on true stories, therefore could never have been played by white actors anyway.
It's not like Leonardo DiCaprio could play Nelson Mandela.
One of the only ways where black people get to play the lead is literally where there is no white competition.
David Oyelowo played Louis Gaines in The Butler, a movie about an African-American White House butler who served 8 American presidents. Pam Williams, one of the movie's producers, says that some investors refused to fund it unless she gave the white actors bigger roles.
One potential investor asked, could we give the butler a white best friend? I don't think the investors we went to were racist when they said these things. I think, again, they buy into the myth that is white people want to see white people on screen, so how can we put more of them into a black movie to make it more acceptable?
And more marketable. According to RentTrack, a company that tracks movie ticket sales, only 5 predominantly black movies have made over $100 million domestically. And then there's the issue of audience. African Americans make up just 11% of frequent moviegoers, while white Americans make up 56%.
There are a lot of movies that are aimed at a specific audience and don't necessarily try to reach out to a broad audience. So I think that crossover appeal is important.
You know, with The Butler, we started out with a predominantly black audience, and in the second week in the box office, it shifted that there were more white people going to see the film.
But movie critics say the shortage of African-American roles that Dandridge witnessed in the 50s is still a problem today.
Until black people are willing to invest their own money, we're going to have to settle for what we get.
A role that Ryan Gosling could play, I don't see why I shouldn't be considered for if race isn't an issue.
And as David was saying, it really is all about improving the types of roles that black actors are offered beyond just, say, the sidekick or the best friend. I think if Dorothy Dandridge was looking down on the Hollywood of today, of course, she would be impressed that things had improved, but certainly there is still work to be done.
The racist white person, I don't mean the person who is examining his consciousness and so on, doesn't understand that he or she is also a race. It's also constructed. It's also made. And it also has some kind of serviceability. But when you take it away, if I take your race away. And there you are, all strung out, and all you got is your little self. And what is that? What are you without racism? Are you any good? Are you still strong? You still smart? You still like yourself? I mean, these are the questions. It's part of it is, yes, the victim, how terrible it has been for black people.
You don't like that.
I'm not a victim. I refuse to be one.
We don't want to see if the racism that we may be holding on to.
In the US agrees. Surveys consistently show that while most black people believe race is an issue, most white people don't. A divergence of opinion that existed even at the height of the civil rights movement in the 1960s. Most white people didn't understand what Martin Luther King was trying to do.
I'm told I was 4 years old when I turned to my mum and I said, well, you know, when am I going to turn white? I was consuming and engaging with media and culture around me, a lot of cartoons, a lot of kids' TV, comics, etc., and well, all the good people were white, and I considered myself to be a good person. I realized at that early age that to be white was to be human. I was attempting to discuss race in white.
I don't know, maybe I am racist. I certainly don't like to think that I am. And I think that's too because the perception, in this society, perception of a racist is a guy in a robe.
Yes, I can write about white people. White people can write about James Joyce and say, you write about race all the time. It's central in your novels. When are you going to write about what? Because you see, the person who asks that question doesn't understand that he or she is also racist. So to ask me when am I going to stop, or when, if I can, is to ask a question that, in a sense, is its own answer. Yes, I can write about white people. White people can write about black people. Anything can happen in art. There are no boundaries there. Having to do it or having to prove that I can do it is what was embarrassing.
In a racist system, and I play my part in it as a white person. So I do have individual responsibility and accountability. I mean, I'm part of the system, and I do things that both perpetuate it, and I try to certainly do things that challenge it.
I realize I've never said anything. When I've heard racist jokes, when I've heard racist comments, I've never said anything. I've never spoken up and said, hey, that's racist. Not once.
Racism in and of itself did not really allow for a discourse of colonization and decolonization, the recognition of the internalized racism within people of color. And it was always, in a sense, keeping things at the level at which whiteness and white people remained at the center of the discussion.
I know that I'm white, and I guess I'm part of that collection. But I don't think about being white. I don't.
In definition.
If you can only be tall because somebody's on their knees, then you have a serious problem. And my feeling is white people have a very, very serious problem. And they should start thinking about what they can do about it. Take me out of it.
Well, the whole concept of theater in this country is a European concept. It's based on a dramatic tradition that comes from Europe. And we're not European people, we're African people. And therefore, African-American people, that is, and therefore, we wanted to create out of our own experience, our own lifestyle, a concept of theater that would fit our sensibilities, you know?
Well, you finally got it fixed. It took you 3 years, but you finally got it fixed. Walter, you just give up and leave me alone. It's Mama's money.
He was my father, too.
Well, so what? He was mine, too, and Travis's grandfather. But the insurance money belongs to Mama. You're picking on me, isn't going to make her give it to you to invest in any liquor stores. And I, for one, say, God bless Mama for that.
See that? You hear what she say to me?
Honey,
You hear what she say to me?
Go to work.
Nobody in this house is ever going to understand me.
You're a nut.
Who's a nut?
You're a nut. See, he's mad, boy.
The world's most backward bunch of women, and that's a fact.
Well, then there are all those men who would lead us out of the wilderness into the swamp. Honey, why you always gotta be picking on your brother? Can't you be a little sweeter sometimes?
Because the problem of being free to write the way you wish to without this other racialized gaze is a serious one for an African American writer. There was a language, there was a posture, there were the parameters. I could step in now, and I didn't have to be consumed by or be concerned by the white gaze.
I say black theater, I'm talking about changing the total thrust of Western theater without a color on it. You see, black used to be you know, you thought of blackness as a skin color, and then we went through that phase, and then the definition was a state of mind. But we're saying now that blackness is the unleashing of an overwhelming creative force.
As though it were a desirable thing to do, to write about white people or to write not about race. That's what.
The black theater was a theater of protest, basically. The theater has for black people been a way of protesting the circumstances within which we attempt to exist in this country.
We have a stand as leaders, new cultural leaders. Our vision is that we develop new cultural leaders who will bring dignity, autonomy, self-respect, and self-love as entrepreneurial artists into the community in which they work, live, and serve. We stand on owning our own property, managing, maintaining, and producing our own art. We think that black art is a healing art, and it has the ability to heal the world. Soul is an invisible, omnipresent quality that comes from love, love of self. Our stand is Harlem now and forevermore is the cultural capital of the world. We're dealing with longevity. We're dealing with sustainability. We're dealing with the opportunity to take the stand of taking care of your own. We, like the tree, will not be moved.